Dad took me up there when I was about 12. We're both left-handed, and he gave me a 7-iron, and I teed it up and just whacked it around. And for about a few months later, it was Christmas. He bought me a set of clubs with a view that if I didn't use them, he would. And he never saw them again.
Greg, welcome to 10,000 Miles. How are you today?
Yeah, Vic, I'm doing great, buddy. How are you going?
I am doing well. Really appreciate you coming on the show. I know you're a busy guy. Just got off a good leg of playing. So thanks for making time for me today.
Too easy, mate. Too easy. Yeah, I'm just entering into an off season, so got a bit of time to chat to people. So it's great.
That's fantastic. Hey, for those who don't know Greg, just by way of introduction, I met Greg at a gym that specialized in rotational sports, baseball, golf, etc. And, Greg, being the lifelong athlete, was in there constantly working on his craft. Greg's been on the PGA Tour for decades. I'm going to let him tell you about his history. But I got to watch the work ethic of a continued athlete who's still at it, still finding success after decades. And, we got started from the head nod to the fist bump, to the handshake, to the good mornings. And, getting to know Greg, I thought he'd be super interesting to have on the show. So, Greg, why don't you, for those who may not know you, although I find that hard to believe, especially if you're following golf, tell people, who you are and sort of where this all started.
Yeah, so I've been a professional golfer for 30 years now. Turned pro when I was 21. I'm 51 right now. Blessed to have played 3 years in Europe, 1 year in Asia and on the Asian tour, and then 25-ish years here in America. I moved to America in 1999. Went to the qualifying, what they call the qualifying tournament or qualifying school in those days in 98, and got through and qualified to play in America at the end of 98 and start rookie year was 99. Played essentially with some status on the PGA Tour, either full or partial, for about 18 of the 25 years, I'd say. And then some on the what they call the Korn Ferry Tour, which is the equivalent of AAA baseball, I'd imagine, if it's a good analogy. And now, 50 years old, we have what's called the Champions Tour, which is for 50 years and older. So you met me as I was preparing to get ready for that. I had about what I would call about a 5-year preparation leading up from 45 to 50, and started working out harder and looking after myself. Stop, eating silly things, stop drinking alcohol, and try to get healthy and get ready for what has been a pretty successful year this year as a rookie on the 50-year-old circuit, Champions Tour. So that's where I'm at right now, and really enjoying myself. I'm, saying yes to a few more things in my life, and I'm in a really nice place and having a good time.
That's a great thing and a great story. We're going to come back to a lot of those things, but I want to take you back into a time. I want to take you back into your early days of golf. When you realized you loved it, when did you realize you had an aptitude for it? And at what point did you realize that you wanted to make a life out of it? So why don't we go back? How did you get introduced to golf?
Yeah, so introduced by my father. He plays, still loves the game, just spoke to him last night actually, still gets nervous and doesn't sleep very well. He plays off a handicap of 20. Played between 16 and 20 for, he's 80 years old now, or 79 years old, and 16 and 20 handicap for pretty much 55 years. And anyway, we lived on what's called the central coast of New South Wales, just north of Sydney, Australia. And he played at a golf course, and you can look it up. It's called Shelley Beach, and it's about 100 yards from the ocean. Beautiful place. Golf is much more affordable in Australia. So Dad took me up there when I was about 12. We're both left-handed, and he gave me a 7-iron, and I teed it up and just whacked it around. And for about a few months later, it was Christmas. He bought me a set of clubs with a view that if I didn't use them, he would. And he never saw them again. I really took to the game. I got taught, I got one quick lesson, on how to hold the club from a coach. And then he just said, okay, go get after it, go play. And I just loved playing. I had a great situation. I rode my bike to the golf club, and I could leave my bike at my dad's. His boss had a house on the right next to the golf club, and I could leave it in the shed, pull my clubs out of the shed, and just walk to the first tee and go play.
Wow.
And I got a great group of friends there, and it was just the perfect storm of passion for the game. And probably I got a handicap of 27 early on, my first handicap, and it was about 3 years down the road when I was about 14, 15. I was playing off about 4. And
Wow.
I was like, I really want to do this at a high level. But yeah, there was a lot of, there's a lot of water that has to go under that bridge before you get to a place where you're turning professional and getting good at it. But yeah, from 15 to 20, it was an interesting journey.
Did you go from 27 to 4 without instruction? Was that all on your own? Were you receiving guidance, mentorship?
Pretty much.
Wow.
In those days, we didn't have the technology we have now. So a lot of the stuff was, mainly rhythm and balance kind of lessons, not really. I moved the club pretty decently. I struck the ball pretty nice. I was lucky that we didn't have a driving range at the golf club. We only had a putting green, and we spent a lot of time as junior golfers just having putting competitions. So I got very good at that part of the game, and that has held me in good stead throughout my life. And I just love playing, and I started playing junior tournaments and winning a few here and there. And then, as we went along and I started to my senior year of high school. In Australia, it's different. And there was, when you're year 12, final year of high school, that's the year that matters for your grades for college. And I quit golf that year. I wanted to get good grades so I could get into college. And what I did, Vic, was my handicap was about +1 at the time, and it went out to about 2 because I wasn't playing much. I was just playing on Saturdays at the club, and then I got good grades, and then those grades last 5 years in Australia, meaning you have access to college with those grades for 5 years.
Wow.
And then I went to the college. I enrolled in college. I went to orientation day, and then I went straight home and told my dad. I said, "Look, I don't want to do this. I want to play golf." And we don't have college programs. And in those days, you're talking about 1993. We don't have the real world was a bit bigger then. We didn't really have the ability to get over, and there people did it, but I didn't really have the funds to get to America and go to college and play. So it was either go to college or play golf. It was hard to do both. So my father uttered a really important phrase. He said, if you treat it like a job, I'll support you, and let's see how you do.
Love it, man.
So I got
Smart
to work.
Guy. That's great.
And off we went.
What'd that journey look like? I mean, so did you start getting after yourself, start competing? What's this competition look like in Australia?
So what it was is I allocated Monday off. And I started, I would go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday was gym days in the mornings. There was a trainer of a local basketball team, professional basketball team, who helped me out.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy named James Bridle. And James, we would meet at 6 a.m. and work out. I would practice. I would try and be on the range by 7 a.m. at the latest in the summer, and then in the winter, probably 8 o'clock or so. Our winters aren't as brutal as some of the winters here. And I would do long game in the morning at one place where my coach was at the time. And then I had a coach named Ross Metherall who helped me out. And then I would go back to my home club for short game and play holes in the afternoon. I tried to do sort of 8 hours work a day minimum. And my goal was to outwork you. I wasn't super talented. I certainly wasn't the best player in the state at the time. We had a lot of good players who were better than me, but over time, I became better. And
did you figure out the outwork? I'm sorry. Did you figure out the outwork you thing on your own? Were you inspired by somebody else? Because I think that's something that you go from sport to sport and you consistently hear about outworking you. And, there's a whole story about Michael Jordan or Kobe about the amount of practice they put in. Michael's the documentary on Michael was unbelievable. You'd go to his house, you'd practice. they'd cook you food, you'd shower, you'd go to practice, and then you come back and you'd practice again. And the way Kobe described it was, if I got 3 hours a day more than you did, and I did that 7 days a week, and I got 21 hours a week more than you, and I got 84 hours a month more than you, and I do that over 10 years, there's no way you're going to catch me. Just not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah. How did you figure that out?
So what motivated me the most was fear of looking back, and I was more afraid of looking back in years' time and going, I could have done more than that, than I was of trying and failing. I think a lot of people, I've seen friends do this, I've seen other players do this, they don't try because they realize that if they put all their effort into it and fail, that means they're not good enough. I was happier with that concept than I was with, I'm going to work my butt off, and if I want to look back at this, that's everything I got. That's all I've got. I can't do any more. And so that was my key motivation. And I started to see the results. I was fortunate that I don't know what you call it, if it's fortunate or not. I saw some results started to play at a high level for an amateur. And I won the Australian amateur when I was 19, which was our biggest event. I wasn't able to travel overseas much. I won a tournament, a French amateur championship. Went to play in what they call the Eisenhower Cup, which is the best 4 players from every country. Played with Tiger Woods at that one, when we were about 18, 19. Wow. So I was getting to a place where, okay, I'm beating people in my age bracket at my level. And so you get to 21, and it's now time to see if you can do it as a professional. And I had some skin. I don't say skins on the wall. I had some performances as an amateur in professional events. I'd had a top 15 in the Australian Open, and you get to play some of the events in Australia. So as a stepping stone, I thought I could beat some people in Australia at the time. Looking back at it, but yeah, the work ethic was just, to me, it was just a box you have to tick. The talent is something that you hope you have, but the work ethic's the easiest box to tick. You just have to do it.
That's the one you're in control of.
Yes, and if you're fortunate enough to be really successful without working hard, and I've seen some players do this, they've been really, really successful without working that hard. They're just very talented. Some players have done that professionally in golf. It's very rare, and good luck to them. But there's most of us have to put time and effort in to get good.
There are a bunch of golfers out there, and I'll leave names out so we don't insult anybody, but someone comes to mind pretty quickly. Most will know who it is, who's probably one of the most naturally gifted golfers you'd ever watch. And but just not only is the work ethic wasn't there, but the lifestyle was just not conducive to being a consistent athlete and performing against the rise of talent, let alone the talent for that day. Because the talent in your game continues, like in all sports. People are jumping higher, they're running faster, they're stronger, and all of that translates into every single sport. So, and the equipment has changed as well, from clubs to the balls to the conditions of the course and everything all around it. So, play is at an incredibly elite level, and it's going to happen. If you're a fan of movies, there's a movie called A Bronx Tale. It was Robert De Niro, and he plays a bus driver, and he was the father of a kid whose name was Cologio. And he would always say, son, nothing worse. The worst thing in life is wasted talent. That was like one of the themes in the movie, nothing worse than wasted talent. And what he meant by that is some people have the talent and absolutely zero work ethic. But what's interesting to hear, and I'm not surprised at all, because I'm watching you and hear you still after it as you prepped for 5 years to get on the Champions Tour. That is a constant that has to happen, no matter if you're 20, 21, 31, 41, or now 51. There's a discipline and a routine that has to be followed in order to compete. Otherwise, you're done. You're out. It's the table stakes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things too. It's probably one of the hardest things for a lot of people in the game, in that no one it'd be easier if someone was your boss and just said, you have to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
I always used to remind myself somewhere there's someone working harder than you. Right. And I was around a couple of other players too, who have gone on to be pretty successful in the game, who had similar plans and similar work ethics, and some younger, some a little older. And we didn't, I wouldn't say we practiced together, but we were around the same places a lot and at the same venues, and you could see, well, they were doing it, so I better do it. So I get motivated by seeing other people do things and how hard they're working. And even in today, I get motivated just when I go to the gym and I see people who don't have to go to the gym who are there. And I'm like, well, if you're here, I should be here. It's my job. Right. So it's just, to me, it's like putting your chips on the table, and you get to find out how good you are, rather than wasting any time or talent, and not putting that effort in. That would be so sad to me and so frustrating. I don't want to do that.
It's tough. This translates and transcends into all areas of life, by the way. So I've spent the last, 20, 25 years working in and out of corporate America, both inside and then as a consultant. And I tell people all the time who are looking for their next job or their next opportunity, what do you think people are doing to get that next job? How do you think they're getting better than the 500 other applicants? What are they doing extra? Like what's happening before they go to work? When you get to the job, let's say it's a 9 to 5, the stuff you do there, that's the stuff you're supposed to do. Now, you may get better in the course of that day. And likely you are if you're researching, doing things, trying new things. And in my space, technology, creating some things. But like the real skills, they're learned on nights and weekends until you get to a level of competence that, you're sailing off. But even at my age of 60 now, I'm learning new things every single day. There's not a day, because I'm going to outwork the next guy, much like you. I'm not an athlete. I don't play sports for a living, but that mindset is with anybody who wants to move forward. So you're in Australia, you're winning amateur competitions, like your love of golf came through your dad. You went quickly from a 27 to 4, and I might dislike you a little bit now with no coaching. So, but that's the talent side. Not to discount the grit. Sure, you've had a ton of grit there. It still do. How did you make it to, tell me what happened after you start winning in these bigger amateur tournaments? What's the path look like from there?
Yeah. So once I started winning some stuff, and then like I said, I'd said to my father, I want to see if I can turn professional. When I had won the Australian Amateur in 1993, in those days, you had 2 years where you didn't have to qualify to be a professional. You could just write a letter and say, I'm turning professional. And then they would give you, it was a different, it's similar in the States. It's similar if you win the US Amateur, they'll give you opportunities. It's similar to that in a way. You don't have to go to the qualifying tournament. So we have a qualifying tournament on our tour in Australia, and I didn't have to do that. So I immediately, in the January of 1995, I had written that letter and I turned professional. And my first event was the New Zealand Open. And I flew over to Wellington, and I lived in Perth at the time, which is on the very west coast of Australia. I think I spent about $3,500. I didn't have a sponsor. I was just doing it on credit card debt at the time. I made the cut and I finished dead last. And I think my first check was about $450.
Okay.
So I think the most pivotal week, there's been a few pivotal weeks in my career. One of the most pivotal weeks was the very next week. We went back and played a tournament in Melbourne, and I was sleeping at a mate's house underneath his pool table out in his game room. I put a mattress underneath that. There were 3 of us staying there. And so we were just staying at a mate's house, and I'd shot 5 over the first round, very difficult golf course called Kingston Heath. And I went out, and I looked like I'm missing the cut, and I went out and I shot 7 under from that tournament on. I shot 5 under the next round, made the cut, and it was a very tough week. I ended up finishing 3rd and picked up about $16,000 US.
Okay.
Which at the time made me fully exempt in Australia, and now I was off and away. And so I was then able to fund going to Asia and trying to qualify for that a month later. And I went over there and I qualified for that. So I started playing in Asia immediately. And I had some success. I won some professional tournaments. We have a little circuit in May called the May Circuit with some smaller 4-round events in Perth in Western Australia, and I won 3 of them. And I was flying. I had like $50,000 in my bank account, and I was really going by June. And by the end of the year, I entered the European qualifying tournament, and there's 2 stages to that, and I got through both of those to get my card in Europe. So my rookie year was just a phenomenal year. I qualified for 3 tours in Australia, Asia, and then Europe. And so I moved to London 1996. I left home from Perth and said goodbye to my parents and moved straight over to London to start playing the European Tour. And to be honest, got my ass handed to me.
Really? Well, a lot of good European golfers.
Yeah. I was broke by June, and I actually booked a flight home, and I had one more event left to play, the Dutch Open. I actually had a lot more events, but I didn't have the money to play. And I played the Dutch Open. This was another pivotal week. I finished 8th, and that gave me enough money not to keep my card, but to just stay. And I got to stay and compete. And then the following year, I went down to their version of the Korn Ferry Tour, which was 1997, and I played great. I finished 3rd I won one time I finished 3rd on their money list, which meant I was now fully exempt back on Europe. And 1998 was probably the following year one of the best years of my career. I won in Australia. I had finished 25th on the money list on the European Tour, finished 2nd twice. Shot 61, 11 under in 1 round in the English Open.
Nice.
Finished 2nd there. I had a massive year. Finished 3rd in the Q School at the end of that year to qualify for America. Really big year, and kicked me off in coming to America. 1998 was an absolute pleasure.
When did you move to the States?
99 was my rookie year, and I rented a house in Orlando with a buddy and I. Matt Goggin and I rented a house. Tried Orlando first. Didn't really love the place, but we loved playing in America. Obviously, I was on the PGA Tour. He was on, at the time, I think it was called either Buy.com or Nike Tour, what's called the Korn Ferry Tour now.
Yep.
And so we were both living together as Aussies. There were a few other Aussies who lived in Orlando. We tend to go where other people have already set up camp, and Stuart Appleby and Robert Allenby were already in Orlando. And so we tried that, and neither of us ended up staying there long term. I moved to Dallas the next year, but it was a cool first year. I kept my card, and I was off and away. I was really enjoying living in the States. It's the best tour in the world, the PGA Tour. There's a lot about it that's just awesome, and as a young man, and it was a lot of fun.
I take it the guys in Orlando didn't have a mattress under the pool table, which is why you weren't comfortable.
We graduated onto better digs, better hotels.
The mattress went on the pool table. I mean, that's a big lift right there, right?
Yeah.
So hey, 99. That's an interesting time, Greg. That's like the coming out of the Tiger Woods, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Didn't he
turn pro in 99?
No, he was actually before then. He won the Masters at 97. So I think he turned pro was 96.
96. Okay.
I believe so. Yeah. So I've been right in the meat. Blessed to have played with him several times, both as an amateur and as a pro. And never seen anything like that man hit a golf ball. I've played with a lot of great players in my career, and I haven't seen anybody do with a golf ball what he could do at his peak, particularly 2000, 2001, just some incredible golf. But yeah, blessed to also reap the benefits financially of the growth of the game through his participation. It was nuts what happened to the purses in a very quick time. When I arrived, we were playing for $2.5, $3 million a week, and very, very quickly it was $5 million, $6 million, and now it's 10, 9. It's gone crazy in the last 20 years.
When I hear interviews with other tour pros, they all say the same thing. Like you just, amazing golfer, but what he did for the game and, the rising tide lifting all boats, so to speak, just, changed the stars for a lot of you guys out there grinding and changed the way you guys were able to make a living and turn a life out of golf. So it's a pretty interesting
Oh, absolutely.
phenomenon.
Yeah. It was amazing.
As a fan, watching Tiger and all of you out there, I don't obviously have the insight you do, but, Tiger was very sort of in his own thing very early on. And now, whether it's the way they're marketing him or just something that comes with age, he seems comfortable in a little bit more of a mentor position and around some of the younger guys and cutting it up and still doing his thing. Was there, is that my perception of who he was then to who he is now accurate, or?
I think so. And I think that's
Yeah.
a natural, I think it's based on my experience this year on the Champions Tour, it's a
Mhm.
natural progression for a lot of people as they age to A, soften a little bit, B, recognize the finish line is nigh, it's close, and that you aren't what you used to be. And obviously he's had some very serious health issues. So even though, just hitting a golf ball, it's still that, bigger, faster, stronger are the other people, and they're all very good at the game. I wish for some of the young guys that you got to see what I saw and that version of him, but that's just not how, I'm sure some of the people wish I got to see something like a Nicholas or someone at their prime. That would have been phenomenal. So
Would have been phenomenal.
there's always someone in every era that's like, oh, wow, that's incredible, what they can do. So, yeah, there's definitely a softening, I think, and it's a nice thing, I think. And there's also, I don't know I know from my personal perspective, there's a point, and I'm in this world now where if I have any information, I'd like to go to help someone and make them better, because my ego isn't threatened by, I'm okay with where I'm at, and I think he's entering that phase as well.
Well, you both have accomplished a lot, and just to be in this game for that long is impressive. There are not many other sports where people can join a tour when they turn 50 and have another, 10 to 13 years. How old was Watson when he came close and where was he at St. Andrews?
Yeah,
What
I
year
think it was like
that?
64. Yeah,
Something
no,
like that. That was a mind blower.
I
It was a mind blower.
Yeah.
It was a mind blower. Hey,
yeah, it's a crazy game. It's a crazy game, Vic. I just quickly, I remember when I won the Australian Open in 1998. In the field were people that I revered, were heroes of mine: Greg Norman, Nick Faldo. So that's the
Wow.
weird thing about this game. You can be, the next guy to beat, Justin Thomas or Xander Schauffele might be a 15-year-old who's sitting here, and in 5, 6, 7 years' time, he's like, well, here I am. So
Amazing.
It's a crazy game like that.
It is. How has the gear changed over the years, and what would you say it's done for you as a golfer, good, bad, and ugly?
I think it's made some of my weaknesses easier to hide. And I think one of the biggest assets we have these days isn't necessarily the gear, although that's an asset. It's the ability to measure. So when you can measure things so readily and easily with launch monitors and things like that and body movement technology, you can become quite optimal. And so you can learn, an example would be if I'm 2 degrees down with my driver versus 2 degrees up, so a 4-degree difference, I can carry the ball 17 yards further with the same swing. And so that can be adjusted through different ways that we can move or ball position or things like that. So I think the optimal piece of it, the measurable piece of it, is fascinating. The adjustment to the golf ball is certainly a big deal. That took a while for someone like me, because the golf balls I grew up with were very, very soft and certainly vastly different to what they are now. And then, the discussion around equipment always leads to, is it better or is it worse? And ultimately, it's up to the governing bodies, and they've allowed happen what has happened. And so every piece of equipment we use has been allowed by the governing bodies. And so if there's any question, it really should fall at their feet, rather than asking the pros what do they think. It really, if you don't like it, it's really down to them, USGA, RNA. It's their fault if you don't like something. So it's going to be interesting in the coming years. I think they've certainly reached some thresholds on what the ability is of the equipment, but I don't think we've touched on you see some of these young guys now. There's going to be someone coming out who can carry the ball crazy numbers and club head speeds that'll be crazy, because power has become not just an asset, it's become a necessity. So it's got to be in your skill set now. And when I was a kid, you didn't need that. You didn't need power. You could play just with finesse. And now that's not dead, but you better have some power with your finesse now, or you're not going to make it.
How much of a difference does the power make these days? Like that extra 20 or 25 off the tee.
You can't compete. Like if you hit it next to me, if I went and played a PGA Tour event, and I'm probably, even though I'm 51, I'm probably the longest I've ever been in my life. I can carry it around 290 odd. It's on the bottom half of the PGA Tour carry numbers. If you hit it next to me and you're just starting out, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. You have to be, and you have to gain 2 yards a year to stay competitive almost these days. So, you're fighting against nature, because naturally you're going to get weaker if you don't do anything. So it's something I wish I got on. I didn't get in front of it quickly enough. It took me a long time to get on that page. I should have got on it really early, but you're a bit scared in the middle of your career when you're in your 30s that you might mess up something. We didn't really have the knowledge we have now. Now we know. Now we know we're much closer in golf now to here's what you need to do. Here's with the advent of either TPI or someone like Train PMT or Jared Phillips. We know now some of the areas we need to be strong and healthy, and so you can get after it and attack the golf ball.
The ability to measure is just, I can't emphasize it, because everything that I do in business, measuring outcomes, measuring progress, and now the tools that I've seen between, the pressure plates on the floor and the swing speed monitors and the Proteus and all of these other things that come into play that give athletes the ability to sort of measure their capability, their range of motion, swing speed, angle of attack, all of those things. And then you guys can like almost with a micrometer, dial in the differences and then associate those feelings in that swing plane and in the body movement to what's happening at the club face, and then the results coming off the ball speak for themselves. That's had to have completely just, like shining a ray of sunshine in a dark box. I mean, that has to have opened the world up for all of you.
Oh, it's only getting better. And as the money in the sport grows, the technology grows with it. So if you watch, if you're a baseball fan and you watch and you see all the stats that they keep on baseball now, golf is moving into that world now, where we will be able to know, and we're very, we're already close there, pretty much there. We'll be able to know, here's what you should do on this hole in this situation. Now, the human factor, obviously, of controlling thoughts or, what you're looking at, or, all the emotional side of sport is always going to be there. But in terms of making decisions and changing the way you move, there's going to be so many great options for young people going forward. I liken it to, if you watch an old NBA game and you see someone do this sweet little layup from 50 years ago, and now we're doing tomahawk jams. That's the world we're moving towards, where it's just very, very athletic, very powerful, very strong. And so it's going to be a future of, like tennis is now a little bit, where, hey, if you don't serve it at 140 mile an hour and you're not 6'3", it's very hard to compete.
Yeah. You said something that I've written in my notes here, and you've offered a great transition. Mental side, mindset. It's everything. So we've just spent 30 minutes talking about ramping up through your career. We've talked about discipline. We've talked about drive. We've talked about treating it like a job, which if I had a nickel for every time I talk to my kids about something like that and use that term, because it came from my parents as well, treat it like a job, treat it like a job. But the mental side of this game is so unique. It is so hard. You have to stay in character, in mental state, or you get pulled out of it and back in for 4 to 5 hours at a time, and arguably more, because you're prepping, you're getting in the mindset, and you're getting through this. And who knows, if there's a rain delay or if there's something else going on. But at a minimum, pro round is what, 4 to 5 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So that's a grueling amount of time to keep the blinders on, to stay focused. And now as young guys grow up with these things, right? And the
Yep.
short spurts and the attention deficit, I mean, that's a detriment to the game, really to life, in my humble opinion, because it's narrowed everybody's focus. What do they want to see? They want to see a reel on Instagram. They want to see a short on TikTok or on YouTube. I have friends that go, man, your podcast is over an hour. I have friends that have 3-hour podcasts. It's like, they don't even have, I can't even focus that long. Like, can you cut me a couple of, 60-second reels? How have you managed that all these years? Are there techniques that you have deployed? Were there things you read? Was there advice you had received? Like, build up this Greg Chalmers story around the mental game and the mindset approach.
So I was very, very open to sports psychology at a young age. I probably started seeing a sports psychologist as soon as I started playing at a pretty high level. In Australia, sports, about 16 years old, 17 years old, when I was getting close to playing off scratch. And born out of, I look at it like I try and treat myself very early on. I tried to treat myself like a company, and one of my companies, probably my biggest asset is my body, and it's because that's what generates income. And then one of those pieces is how do I think? How do I control my emotions? And how do I be psychologically as good as possible? I've always been very tenacious. I think that's a very good quality for professional golfers you have to have tenacity, because more often than not in golf, bad happens than good. You don't get a lot of good. It's always, if you think about any given week, if there's 150 players who tee it up, and you ask yourself the question, how many are genuinely happy with their week? And the answer is probably one, right? Maybe a couple others, but most people are walking away going, oh, yeah, I like this bit, but I wish I did this. All right. There's always, you got to find ways to fill the cup, not take the cup, empty.
Yeah.
So you have to be tenacious. And then as I started to learn more about myself, I have always had good emotional IQ, good emotional control. Like, I don't get super upset about mistakes. I get mad, but I have the ability to move on from that. Because to me, if something was going to cost me shots and emotion, then what are we doing? Like, if I'm going to get mad and that's going to make me burn more shots and lose more money, then why be mad, right?
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to get mad at the right things and then move on and focus on the shot you want to hit next, so you can get out of a hole and bounce back. And also accept in golf, and you could do this in any job, the idea that it's going to go perfectly for 4 days is ludicrous. You are going to face challenges. You are going to face adversity, and how you handle that determines whether or not you're going to be successful. So when you start with that attitude, you already know, well, of course, this is going to be difficult. I expect it to be. And then that's much easier to handle when you get in those tough situations, whether it's leading or trying to make a cut, because it's meant to be that way. If it was easy, any clown would do it.
Yeah.
And if you want to achieve anything,
I pointed you to my whiteboard here, it says, if it were easy, anyone can do it. That's one of my favorite quotes, because that just is a reminder as you're grinding and, maybe falling down a few times. Your only failure when you don't get back up that next time. But again, if it were easy, anybody could do it. Everybody would do it, and everybody would have, number 1, number 2 position in the world. And there's a reason why not everybody does. It's very, very hard. See, no matter what you're doing, super, super hard. What do your peers say about the mental side of it? So it sounds like to me, and I've talked to people about EQ for years. I'm so fascinated by the ability for one to manage and measure their own emotions. It's a unique trait. I would say it is trainable to a certain extent. A lot of it has to do with your outlook on life and sort of, who you are as a person and what you're trying to achieve. Are there things you've talked to your peers about while you're out on the road and on tour about how people manage tough spots that might differ from your approach to it? Are there little tricks that you do to say, shit, I just shot a 10 on that hole? Okay. And it's day 2. Am I done? Or, how do I get back in the fight? Like, how do you think about it?
Yeah, so the answer to do we talk is actually pretty rare. Like pros tend to not talk much about this kind of stuff.
Okay.
Because you have to be, it feels, for a lot of pros, it feels like weakness. And so to sit there and talk about, hey, I was thinking about hitting it out of bounds and then I hit it out of bounds, no one really wants to have that discussion. So I talk to professionals. I work with a sports psych still to this day, a good friend of mine named Neil Smith. Neil's out in California, but he's an Australian. And but yet I like to, I've learned several skills to handle situations or try and get the best out of myself. One of my favorite that I like to tell people is I learned a few years ago, if you ask your brain, what it was quoted to me was, if you ask the right question, your brain is hardwired to find the answer. And what I mean by that is, if you get up in the morning and say, hey, what's it going to take to have a great day today? And automatically your brain will start to fight for, okay, well, I got to go to the gym and I got to eat well. And it'll try and fight or it could be something really simple like, hey, I just got to play video games for 2 hours, like depending on what you want to achieve. But your brain will fight to find those answers. And so I can use that skill. What's it going to take for me to be successful this week? What attitude do I need to have a great week? What preparation do I need to do to get ready for this week or this shot? What is a great player going to do in this situation? Right? So they're the right kind of questions I might ask myself. The wrong questions would be, why do I suck this week? Right? Or why am I fat? Right? Well, you're lazy. There's all these things that you just ask the right questions. Sometimes that can be quite powerful. I think having an awareness on how you feel, like I liken anxiety or whether you want to call it nervousness or some those kind of feelings or emotions. I need that to be about 6 or 7 out of 10 for me to play really well. That's when I play my best, because I don't need it to be a 1. That's too flat. I'm bored. And that's a practice round. I don't need it to be a 9 or a 10. That's out of control. But if I wake up in the morning and I'm playing with Tiger Woods at the Players Championship in the last group, and I'm already 7 out of 10, and the tee time's not for 4 hours, I better do some things physiologically to slow that train down, right? I better not drink coffee. I better not have too much sugar. I better watch what I put in my mouth. I better do some deep breathing. I better sit and visualize and just relax, move slowly, control my physiology to then try and affect my psychology, right? So that's the kind of stuff that I would start to get into if I was starting over, or if I was a young person trying to do something in any sort of field where you're trying to get the maximum value out of yourself. And so you need that self-awareness rather than someone who just gets up and goes, man, I'm really nervous, and then runs around really crazy all day, gets on the first tee, panics. Sure, you're going to be nervous, but at least you've given yourself a chance if you had the awareness and tried to slow things down and get in a comfortable place and hopefully get it back down to a 6 or a 7 out of 10 where you can function and be successful.
You say some really interesting things. My nephew lived here with me for a year. I don't think you got a chance to meet him. Aspiring golfer, really nice kid. Started later. He's only a senior now, started later, but really a lot of natural talent. Came out here as part of the Dragon program, and I had him up at Altus Performance with Cameron McCormack. And he was seeing one of his coaches every week for 7 weeks. And on the 8th week, he would see Cameron. And the thing I loved most about Cameron lessons were he really taught Jack how to diagnose himself. And then so he would always say, hey, okay, you just did this. Look at the video. What do you see? I see this. I see that. Well, do you see this? He'd circle it, right? And then he would constantly, so there was a lot of correction. But most of it was giving him the ability to diagnose, but then most importantly, what to do about it. So hey, if you see this and you see you getting this club angle or this inside out, wherever you're heading or your hips coming, whatever it is, learning to have a routine or something you do. Hey, if this happens, go back to this drill. If this happens, do this. And so over time, and this is exactly what you're describing, like in the heat of battle, in the moment. Now, he's not out there videoing and looking videos of swing during the course of the round, but on the emotional side, if you know you're feeling a little amped, I'm not going to drink caffeine. I'm going to eat the right foods. I'm going to do some deep breathing. And I bet if you shot a 10 on a particular hole, because you just had a bad moment there, there are things you'll do while walking to the next hole. Take deep breaths, clear your mind, maybe check your nutrition. Hey, when was the last time I had something to eat? Do I need a little half a PB&J Advil or whatever you guys are putting in the bag, or a bar or something coming along? But the point is that you're preparing for these things and are continuing to prepare for these things and have these routines to bring yourself back to that spot where you're the 5 or 6 or wherever you are as you're moving through. Am I getting that right? Is that what I'm hearing through all this?
No question, Vic. And I think the other thing that we haven't touched on, but I can tell you, is I always had a pretty decent self-assessment process after golf was over.
Okay.
And I think the story, one of the things I could tell you that I have a very good friend, or I had a good friend, and we were playing, both professionals, young, playing the Australian Open. And I looked, I knew where the leaderboards were. And one of the things you have to do is get comfortable with the idea of being on the leaderboard when you start out. Like, what's that look like? What's that feel like to see your name up there, right? So I used to imagine it and I'd visualize it when I'm playing practice rounds. Well, anyway, it turns out my friend, going into Friday's round, about halfway through the round, he's leading the tournament, right? And I look up and I see his name and I'm happy. And then we see each other on the putting green after the round. He ended up just making the cut on the number. He shot like 7-8 over on the back nine. And I said to him, oh, how was it, buddy? What happened? And he said, I just hit a couple of loose shots. And I looked at him and I said, I knew where the leaderboards were and I knew when the crumbling started. And I said, you looked at the leaderboard, didn't you? Right? And he goes, yeah. I said, you need to think about that more than the other problems you think you had. And what happened was, he doesn't play anymore professionally, but what happened was his assessment skill was trying to protect his ego. Rather than sitting there and saying, hey, I looked at that and I got scared, I was prepared to do that as a player and handle it and figure out ways to get better at it. He didn't want to do that. So that would affect his ego. Goes, no, don't do that. So say it's something else. And so that's the skill that needs to be learned for a lot of people to really progress, is have an honest moment afterwards, maybe not during the round, but afterwards. You have to have that honest reflection and go, okay, what went wrong today? Because you want to get better at that, not worse. And so that was a skill set that I think I've been very fortunate to have instilled in me.
So, question for you. Is it more of what went wrong today and how do I not do it? Or is it more of what went right and how do I do more of it?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because you're trying to maintain strengths and then improve weaknesses. And sometimes in golf, you might go down a pathway, and I've done this in my career, where you go down, particularly a technique way, you go down on a pathway and you think it's going to make you better. But here we are a few years later and it's like, oh, wow, I'm actually playing terrible. And I'm doing exactly what that coach wanted me to do. So it's very, very, it gets very tricky sometimes, because the good news is for young players and young people now, a lot of the stuff is measurable versus when I was young. So there's no guessing anymore. There shouldn't be, from a coach's standpoint. We can try something and then see if it affects the ball how we want it to affect it, and then implement it if we think if that's what we want. Versus in my day, it was like, oh, you should move this way, and off we go down a path, and then look back and go, oh wow, we've ruined. We're not playing very well. So it's definitely something that is much easier to manage nowadays. But yeah, you definitely have to assess, what are my strengths? If you're looking at like you're building a company, what are my strengths? And you go through all the things you're good at, and how do I maintain those? What am I doing well? What am I practicing? How am I preparing? What do I think about? What are my processes? And then what are my weaknesses, and how do I bring them up to a level that's competitive so that I can manage this and get to a place where I'm, manageably good at some things and brilliant at some other areas as well.
Let's talk about the pre-shot routine. Anytime I've taken I've taken lessons anytime I've taken, and I was up at Altus every week, and I got to see some pretty high level players doing their thing. And by the way, I told my nephew, because he was in a lesson with Cameron, and as he leaves, Spieth comes in. Okay. And
Nice.
so we get in the car when
Good
it's
dude.
done. And what's that?
Good dude.
What's that?
Good guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So
He's a good dude. Yeah.
he was great. He was, we got to know each other from seeing each other there. And real big smile. He was real nice to my nephew, just a genuine guy, somebody you really root for. But we left the lesson. Jordan walks in, high fives Jack or whatever. Hey, what's up? And he walks out of the bay and he's just warming up in the grass a little bit. He's coming in, and I sat in the car. We put the clubs in the back, and my nephew's sitting next to me. I said, I've done my job. And he looks at me. I said, if you're taking a lesson and the next guy to walk in to that same coach is Jordan Spieth, I can't put you in a better situation.
Getting
The
good
rest
information.
is,
Yeah.
right? The rest now is you. It's the desire. It's the discipline. It's the work ethic. It's the mindset. And this mindset requires a lot of very advanced maturity at a young age.
Yes.
I've watched a lot of golfers in the Dragon ecosystem. And there are some golfers who are sophomores who are just lights out in the 60s. I mean, they're just ridiculous. They're probably running a 2 or 3 three on the other side, 2 or 3 under on the other side, handicap. And and some others, they just, they're club smashers. And they're getting angry and they're smashing clubs, and they like playing more than they like grinding, more than practicing. If you had to wait, and this is going to be hard, but I'm just curious if you've ever thought about it this way. I've got the routines and discipline. We're going to come back to pre-shot routine. I've got the physical, training and all the practice, but then I have the mental thing. Let's say they were the 3 things. How would you put those in order of importance? Knowing that you'll fail if any one of those break down.
I would say, in order of importance, probably mental first, work ethic second, skill probably equal second, and third, if that's the third one. Yeah.
It would have been my guess.
Look, yeah, it's pointless being really, really skillful without work ethic. You won't go as far as you want. It's pointless being really, really skilled with good work ethic, but really poor mental processes. You still won't go as far as you want. A great mental process is probably going to, and a good attitude, and is going to hold you in good stead. My theory with a lot of this stuff is some of the very things that make some athletes great mentally are some of the same reasons why they're probably not that great off the golf course, or off the field or playing field, because some of the things you need to be aren't great traits as a human.
Yeah.
Selfish, sense of focused on yourself, like really ego-driven, love being the center of attention. Some of those things, and then you might have someone on my side who's like, hey, because you're more the other way, where you got to fight to get into that state, maybe that's what makes you a good dad or a good husband. Those traits are great, better traits as a human being, but they don't help you competitively because you're too damn nice, right? So I've seen that throughout my career, where different guys might be really good at golf and not much as off the course, and then vice versa. I've seen some guys who are wonderful human beings and probably haven't achieved at a highest level because they're just too nice, right? So it's challenging. It's very, very challenging. I've seen more of the modern era guys like the Rorys and the Jordans and Justin Thomases are some of the first I've seen get both right. Mark Leishman's a great example. Adam Scott from Australia is a great example, who are very well balanced human beings, highly successful on the course, but good off the course as well. There's some of the few that I think are wonderful examples to people to look at.
The same thing happens in the corporate world. I met my wife in the late 80s, early 90s. We married in 93. And I was a different guy. And as, I got deeper into corporate America, started having more responsibilities. Became the CIO of my very first company, went on and did that 4 more times. Had very big responsibilities. Biggest budget I managed on an annual basis was $350 million. I'm having to sign off on documentation that's going into the annual reports. Like, the pressure is mounting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to really perform in that environment, I had to somewhat become something that wasn't natural for me. I had to become a little bit of a robot. The emotions were different. And I was always very kind as a leader to people and had a lot of patience, and unfortunately it didn't translate much to home, because when I got home, I was like, I needed to breathe. And so, if we're going out with friends on a Friday night and dinner's at 7 and my wife's still blow drying her hair at 6:58, I was out of my mind. Right? Because,
Yep.
whoa, we're on schedule here. We have a clock. We got to hit. People are waiting for us. Time is valuable. How could you do this to our, and now I'm like, we'll get there when we get there. It's like, I understand there's a separation. Like, there are some things to be real wound up and driven on. Not so much with your family and your wife. And there's some things. Now, yeah, things are important, but there's got to be an ease to it. I came out of it okay. I wish I could go back and change some of those things, and somebody would have knocked on my door and said, hey, dude, let me just tell you, that works here. Not really. My wife was trying to tell me, but I didn't listen. But I want to get back. I asked you about pre-shot routine for a reason, and I wrote this down because I think in the pre-shot routine are all the things we talked about. It's the mental alignment, it's the physical alignment, it's the visualization. How do you see it? How do other pros see it? Why is it important? How have you thought about it?
Yeah, I have. For my whole life, I've thought about it. I write things in my yardage book that we carry about, mainly the reminders on what I need to focus on. Mainly like we have like what you would call hard eye focus and soft eye focus. And, like soft would be looking at everything. Hard would be I'm looking at that leaf on that tree. So there's some things that I have to make sure I pick good targets. Where am I going to put my eyes? Like, look, what am I looking at? I think one of the biggest, I don't know if it's a misnomer, but a different take on it than what I think. A lot of people think it's the same thing every time. And what I would say is you do whatever, if you start with the premise or the idea, what's it take for me to hit this shot well? And so once you ask yourself that question, some people would say, oh, I need to take a practice swing. Okay, well, let's say you take one practice swing, but you get no concept of movement from that one practice swing. Well, my mind goes, well, the goal of that practice swing or that move is to get a feeling that I want. So I'm going to do it again until I get it. Now, so that's where I differ, or my teachings differ from, with the guy I work with now, Neil. A lot of people would say, no, I've done my one practice swing. That's my routine. We look at it more like, no, the goal of that move is to get a feeling that I want to take into the golf ball. So if that takes one, there's no list on how long, there's no rule, a hard and fast rule on how many times we do it. We need that feeling, right? And so the feeling, and he said, and my guy, Neil, would say, the feeling can be a full swing, half a swing, twiddle your thumbs. He said, I don't care, but I want you to feel good about what you're trying to do before you walk in and hit this thing. So that's where I think there's some more flexibility in the way I would think about it and have been taught to think about it than what I did when I was younger. When I was younger, I was probably more like, oh, it's got to be exactly the same. Now it's more like, what do I want from this routine? I want to be comfortable and ready over the ball. So it's going to include, what feeling do I want when I'm striking the ball? Where's my anxiety level? How do I control that? Deep breathing. And that started probably well back before I even got into getting ready. So there's some pieces to it that I have some flexibility. Like when I'm putting, say, for example, sometimes I might be like, man, I don't feel like I need to do a putting stroke practice here. I'm ready. So why do it? My routine is, are you ready? Yes. Then go. Stroke it. Go. Or are you ready? No, I need to get a good feel for this. Okay. Bang. Okay. Take a couple of strokes. Are you ready? Yes. Go. Right.
So back to the questions, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
back to the
kind of how
question.
I approach it. Yeah. I kind of frame it like that. Like, what's a good shot look like? What's a good target for me? Where do I want to look? They're the questions I ask. And then my brain kind of ticks through the boxes. And then I get into, some semblance of, and look, it's not perfect. What I can tell people, you can hit good shots with bad thoughts. I've hit plenty of great shots without being perfect over the golf ball up here. And you can hit bad shots with really good position and thought, like mindset.
Oh, don't I know that?
Right.
I know
Like
that
there's no magic pill. There's no guarantee. All you're doing is increasing your chances of success. But I've worn, technology that can measure frequencies and things like that. And I've been in wonderful states and hit it out of bounds. So it's just something that gives you an increased chance. It's something it's a bit like a safety blanket. You can go to it when you're under a lot of pressure. So you can just execute this plan. But it doesn't, in my world, it's not the same every single time, because my questions are more based around what do we want out of this, rather than it must be the same all the time. Because I could say to you, Vic, hey, in your routine, I want you to do 10 star jumps. And you're going to go, oh, why? And I go, well, it's the same every time. But that doesn't help you hit the golf ball.
Makes sense.
Right?
Makes a lot of sense.
So that's why there has to be some flexibility, in my opinion, because you've got to do things that help you hit a good shot. And sometimes that can be 2 practice swings, or 1 or none, because you feel good. Right. So
I love it.
It's having, you got to have a lot of self-awareness. It's a different way to go about it.
I got 3 things left on my list, and I'm going to call them out, and then we're going to go through them. And I just don't want to make sure we don't forget them. 1 is I want to go through a memorable moment. 2 is I want to talk about your podcast. 3, I want to talk about what's next on your list, like what you want to go for. So let's go back to memorable moment. Now, you mentioned a few wins, but I want to get smaller. I want to break it down to a particular shot or something. We all see the one shot with Tiger hit, and it went up the hill and it rolled down and it hung on the cup. Do you have a shot like that in your mind that, was just you were in a tough situation, or it was real clutch? You had to make a shot that you knew was tough and you made it. Do you recall anything like that? Something pop out in your memory banks?
Yes, there's a few of them, but one, I've only won once on the PGA Tour. It was the Barracuda Championship in 2016 in Reno. And before I tell this story, Vic, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
We can say it where all you like.
Yeah. Okay.
We can swear.
So, sorry. Yeah, okay. So I was leading this tournament Sunday, very nervous, handling it okay, and still leading through 11 holes. And I hit this tee shot off the 12th hole. It's basically all trees on the right and like dead, and then out of bounds left. And I hit this very steery, when you feel like you're trying to manipulate, like control too much, like through the impact zone, very steery kind of heel putt that went into the left, nearly out of bounds, but in the left rough. And I walked off the tee, and in my head, I said to myself, if you don't fucking swing freely and aggressively the rest of the way in, just walk in now.
Wow.
You're done. And then I ended up making a really good putt for bogey on that hole from 10 feet. And then I hit really good drives the rest of the way in, really positive and aggressive, to culminate with, on the 18th hole, flushed a driver down the middle, hit a 7-iron to 10 feet, made eagle, and won the tournament. Nice. So that was probably a bad tee shot, and that's kind of gives you a snapshot of how I have to talk to myself to get in competitive mode.
Self-talk, certainly important.
Yeah, I say things like that to myself, not degrading like that typically, but I'm much more intense in my head than I come across day to day. I'm much more like, let's fucking go, right, in my head. But I'm shaking your hand saying, have a great day, Vic. Right? So
what's this fucking guy doing?
Yeah, right. It's the competitive side to sport that, honestly, you need to have. You need to have some part of you that has a bit of mongrel. If you don't have it naturally, you need to find it. And a bit of in toughness and hardness that is that negates some of the softness and negativeness that I don't like in myself, that I abhor. So
Cool story.
it's yeah, that's probably
Cool
it.
story. Hey, your podcast. Why don't you tell us all about it?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah, so I joined Hack It Out Golf. It's with Mark Crossfield, who has about 400,000 subscribers on YouTube, does a lot of content helping people play better golf. And then Lou Stagner, who is a statistic nerd, stat nerd. And we do a podcast, game improvement stuff, helping people play better golf. I joined them because someone had left. And they wanted to try me out for a little bit, and we're still going. It's been 2 years now. A lot of fun. Just I probably got me at the right time of my life a couple of years ago, where at my peak of my career, I probably would have said no thanks. But I was not doing much. I'm 48. I'd never tried the podcast world, and I really enjoy it. It gives me a chance to have a bit of chat and a bit of sense of humor, and it's more relaxed than, say, formal TV stuff or anything like that. And it's very flexible time-wise, as you would know. And so it's been a lot of fun.
Do you do it virtually like this, or are you all in the same room?
No, virtually like this. Mark lives in England, and Lou is actually up in New Jersey.
Wow.
It's so we're all three. We only met for the first time this year. Actually, we did it for a year and a half before we actually met each other in person.
How great!
But we did it on the just like this. So it's easy. It's just a nice little side hustle. That's a lot of fun.
How often do you do it?
We punch out. We have 3 episodes a week, 2 main episodes, short content, 20, 30 minutes.
Okay.
We have one on Saturday. We call Saturday, which is a stat-based little 10 to 15 minutes when you're driving to the golf course. You can get sort of a breakdown on. We compete. Mark and I compete guessing Lou's question on stats and mainly around not professionals, amateurs and their handicaps and how they can improve the game. Just quick little chat, and then go play your golf. We meet probably once every week and churn out a bunch of content. We do some current affairs, but all of us are very busy, so we tend to not watch golf live like a lot of current affairs people would. So we are mainly sticking more to helping you get better and play better golf.
That's great. I'll be sure to put the link to your podcast in the description section of this episode. So folks, check it out. I'm sure it's going to be worth your time and while for sure. Last question. All right. You're on the Champions Tour. You're 51. You're still grinding at the gym. Do you have goals? You're still trying to achieve things. Where's your mindset now? What if you could talk about the next decade? Let's just stop there. And you got to draw it out as the architect of your own life. What does it look like?
Winning on the Champions Tour would be first goal. More than once would be the next one after that. And honestly, I'm just trying to see what the ceiling is for me. In this age bracket, it's a really cool age bracket because we're all deteriorating at different rates, and sometimes the rate at which someone who was awesome 25 years ago is different to my rate. I just finished 25th on the Schwab Cup on the Champions Tour, and that's starting from sort of nothing March Monday qualifying. So that's a really cool story, and I'm really excited about the future of that and what that could look like. So I'm just trying to maintain health, maintain power and strength, and then learn a little bit about how to play better. I've started getting a lot more into the technology side of things. I'm going to start getting a little bit more in the stats side of things, so I can measure where I'm going wrong and why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I've been on Swing Catalyst Sports Plates with one of the best experts in the country, Dr. Scott Lynn, who's out in California. Seen him several times in the last 2 years. Contemplating purchasing my own. I purchased my launch monitor this year, so I've been working really hard on. I'd use that for wedge distance control and things like that. So I'm probably getting a lot more value out of my preparation now than I ever have. I'm doing it a lot more informed and professionally. And so the goal is a win, and then once we tick that box, keep pushing and keep going. And so I'm really enjoying the competitive side. The Champions Tour is honestly, Vic, it's one of the best tours in the world. Everyone's really softened, and it's a nice place. It's got a great mix of competition and lifestyle. It really is a great place to play golf.
That's fantastic. A lot of greats still playing out there, and I'm glad to hear that you're still out there reaching for 2 miles an hour a year and doing your thing.
Yeah.
Greg, an amazing chat today. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sort of telling everybody about the mindset, the physical, the discipline in your journey. I had a really great time getting to know you a little bit more today. So I want to say thank you for taking your hour out of your day today and sharing that with the audience.
Thank you, Vic. Thanks for having me, buddy.
You are welcome. See you soon.
Thank you.
Cheers.